Hello and welcome to my podcast called Innervation. Innervation was inspired by my previous podcast, Silence, where over the course of 2 years, I spoke every week with a total of 100 women from science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM. I kept all of those guests anonymous so that they could talk openly and honestly about their lives. We discussed their experiences, what they've learned along their life journeys, and their hopes and ideas for living fulfilling and contented lives. Because their identities on Silence were always kept safe, the conversations were always so raw and transparent, and we didn't just talk about being women in STEM, but about everything. The topics that tended to come up were also the same topics that I discussed with my own friends or family or mentees, or I'm asked about in private after I've given a talk in schools and colleges. So it seems clear to me that there are just some topics that are very important to us, but we only ever discuss them with people that we feel safe with or people that know us well. They're basically topics that we delve into when we let our guard down and show our vulnerability. So what I've done is sift through all the episodes of Silence to bring you those favourite topics, and each week on Innervation I'll be reflecting on the perspectives that came up from Silence that I feel are pearls of wisdom on kind of awkward topics that no one ever really wants to talk about. But the sound bites that I've found are particularly provoking, inspiring and empowering, and I hope they are for you too. This week is all about willingness. So what exactly do I mean by willingness? Well, for the purpose of this podcast, I'm talking about the kind of energy and enthusiasm and keenness to do things. The reason why I wanted to talk about this topic is because sometimes I see people with all the talent in the world, all the skills, all the know-how, the natural gifts actually for doing really well, particularly in STEM, because I'm in kind of STEM world. And with all of that knowledge and with all of that talent, they're just not willing to work hard. And it frustrates me over and over again. And, you know, I was guilty of the same thing myself. Because, you know, I may have been good in certain subjects, but there were times when I just didn't have the enthusiasm to work hard and the enthusiasm to apply myself. And the reason why I wanted to raise it as a topic is because sometimes I think that can be a terrible waste of an opportunity. So I wanted to bring the topic of willingness up because it's really just a plea to anyone out there that's got loads of talent and skill in something to really apply those talents and skills to the best of your ability. I often come across people that ask me, you know, my opinions on things and, you know, how did I do certain things? And they ask for my advice. And you know, then they'll tell me about themselves and they'll tell me about like how brilliant they are and how accomplished and all the things they've done and their experiences. And I'm often left feeling way more impressed about what they've been through than what I've told them about my own life. And yet they're wanting to know how they can get further. And the answer every time is willingness. Really, it's, you know, if you really, really want something, you do have to apply yourself. You do have to work hard. And I think we live in a day and an age where things are often handed on a plate. They come quite easily. But what I've seen of people that have willingness is they really fight hard for what they want. And they realise that there's actually no substitute for hard work. Hard work can get us absolutely everywhere that we want to get to. Hard work and determination. And for me, that's what willingness is all about. My guest from episode 5 summarises it plain and simply.
into it, like, if that makes sense. Just because it's like finally sunk in that it is about the hard work and the willingness to put into the time. And I feel like it took me a while to get to this zen point of like, it's all about the work, but it really is. And so
I must admit that as I've got older, I've really started to see willingness differently, because when I was young, still at school, college, university, I really had a willingness to do well. Like, I was pretty competitive. I wanted to impress my parents, make them proud. And so it was all about academic achievement. So I really had a willingness to work hard. And I must say, looking back, it was relatively simple because you just had to work really hard in your subjects. And for me, even though it wasn't easy, I was able to get the grades that I wanted by pushing and pushing and pushing really hard for those grades. But what I found with life is that sometimes we get distracted with other priorities. You know, sometimes we're really, really willing to be successful at work, but then actually we need to put our families first because, you know, either it's a new family that we've started ourselves, or we have family members that are getting older and sick and we have to take care of them. And so basically our priorities can change. And I think what I've learned along my life journey is that sometimes you may have all the willingness in the world, but it's not so easy to apply yourself because we have other responsibilities. And so our approach towards willingness has to change. And that's one of the major lessons I've learned, is that, you know, when I was younger and at school, I could focus 100% on my academic goals. But as I've got older, things have become less clear-cut. And so it's not just a case of putting 100% of my time into achieving my goals, but it's about balance, and it's about learning to put things in an order of priority and to be able to apply oneself equally to all the things that are important. And I think as you get older, more and more different things become important. But whether you're an employer or an employee, I think willingness stays the same. I think we start to really have to get clear about what is important to us the older we get. And that's certainly been my story, is that as I've got older, I've really had to ask myself what is important to me. Not what other people think is important for me, but what do I think is important for me? And for the first part of my life, all that was important to me was my education. But once I'd got my education, and it took a while because I did a couple of degrees, what then became important was friends, family, work, hobbies, and sort of self-evolution and self-growth. And all of those different aspects have taken time. You know, time is spent on all of those things. And so what was initially just a straightforward willingness to do well at school then became compromised as I tried to allocate my time to different things. And so I would say in summary that as I've got older, I've learned to channel my willingness in a more focused way. So it's not just about working hard all the time, which has very much been my philosophy. I just work non-stop and really hard all the time. It's become more about when I am at work, putting 100% focus during those hours. And then when I am with my family, to be 100% focused on that and not be on my phone and distracted by other things. And then when I am with my partner, to really be focused on him and not be distracted with my friends. And so I've really had to create boundaries in order to show willingness in all of those different areas of my life. And I think people can sometimes stereotype us and just think, oh, well, you know, now she's hanging out with her friends, she doesn't care about her schoolwork, or, oh, now she's had a baby, she doesn't care about her job. And I think that is such a clunky way of judging people, because I think, you know, I would say that most of us just really want to be the best we can be. And so it's really important to try and spot people's willingness and also show willingness in yourself. I think everything I'm trying to say can be summarised by a soundbite from episode 79.
But what I see lacking is we get to a level, and you know, you're talking all my career and all my schooling, I've always seen that girls have performed better in grades in comparison. There's hands down more sincerity, more willingness. But I have seen, you know, when women hit milestones,
Yeah.
like having a baby, which is probably the biggest milestone that they hit. I don't think marriage changes that much if they have a good partner, and I think vice versa for the partner as well. But having kids, etc., I feel it's a little bit of a, you know, we are not catering for them to then come back in, and that's where the stereotype just holds back. I remember that, you know, I was interviewing a person to hire in the team, and I asked somebody to give me a feedback, and you won't believe that that person said she's good, but she has kids, so she'll go home early. And I was just thinking that, you know, I'm definitely, if that is the feedback you've given me, then I'm definitely hiring her. And you know, looking back, she was one of my best hires because she was the first one in the office and she would deliver. When she was there, she was so focused that, you know, so these stupid stereotypes keep coming up. And I'm like, really? But they are my best performers. I have history, I've seen them, I've done it. Can you say the contrary to the contrary? You know, can you prove the opposite?
So that guest talks about a woman who was working in a company, an engineering or STEM company of some sort. And then she went away to have a baby. And everyone thought that because she was going off to have a baby that she wouldn't have willingness in her job anymore. But what's interesting is that often women who are trying to have it all, as in trying to have the family, trying to have the job, trying to have the friends, trying to have the hobbies, they're often so much more willing because they know that their time is precious. And so the time that they do spend on those different aspects of their life, they're really 100% focused. And I find that really inspiring because sometimes people can get lazy and just say, oh, you know what, I won't try and have it all. I think I'll just have a little bit. But when people are really driven and are really willing to apply themselves and work really, really hard, that to me is really inspiring. And many guests on my podcast, they talk about how having willingness within themselves to do certain things has been noticed by others. Often on Silence, my previous podcast, there were lots of women that talked about being overlooked because they were female or because they happened to be pretty. They were stereotyped in certain ways within the STEM communities. But I think what always pulled them out of any stereotypes and what really set the record for them was their willingness to apply themselves and show people what they're made of. This from episode 95.
They're still predominantly male. It was always interesting. It always felt competitive, but also I got lucky at finding groups of guys that didn't always care, and I was lucky enough for them in school and like with mentors and stuff. They just saw past the gender and they just saw the passion or the endurance or the knowledge and education and willingness to learn there.
So I think, just to sum up then, I think willingness is a really beautiful quality. I think willingness really sets you apart from a crowd. I think if you have willingness in certain areas, like you have enthusiasm, you're really keen to do something, you really want to achieve something, that makes you really willing. And willingness can be such a powerful characteristic because it can make people take notice of you and make people think, wow, she really wants this. And sometimes that can be all it takes. It's not necessarily what you achieve at the end of all that willingness, but it's just the willingness to get going in the first place. And so if you catch yourself sometimes feeling a bit lazy or thinking like you've got this and you kind of know it, just remember all those people that maybe aren't as talented as you or maybe don't need to work as hard as you, who are working really, really hard to get what they want. I think that can often be way more engaging, inspiring, and aspirational than someone that doesn't need to really push hard and kind of has things handed to them on a plate. So willingness, in my opinion, is a really great characteristic to have. I think it has to be moderated, because I think if you're in extreme self-will, that can be difficult to be around for other people. But to me, the opposite of laziness is willingness, and that can only be a good thing. And in my experience, willingness and an eagerness to do well has often been exactly the fuel I've needed to work hard and to not feel bad about working hard. So yeah, ask yourself where you're willing in your life today, and that might actually indicate to you where you're most passionate. Thank you so much for listening. Please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review if you can. I'd love to have your feedback about this episode or any others that you've listened to, and maybe even some suggestions for future topics for this show. It's all about self-discovery and evolution on Innervation, particularly with a view to becoming a more fulfilled and contented human being. Be kind and loving to yourselves, and I wish you all a great week.